restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces. And no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirit begged him, "Send us unto the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated.
Well, we're kind of exploring a second part of the sermon series that I have tentatively called What Happened. And last week we talked about what happened in Jericho. This week we're talking about what is happening in the tombs. And this is one of those stories that always, when I was a kid growing up, it fascinated me on the one hand, but it scared me on the other. I don't know about you. I don't know about your history with this particular scripture. It's in 3 of the 4 Gospels. It's in Matthew and Mark and Luke. So it's in all the Synoptic Gospels. But it's a story that when I was growing up, I kind of almost imagined. It was hard for me to wrap my mind around what this man looked like. And the closest I could get in my mind was like a werewolf. So it's crazy. And in fact, there's even one point in the scripture where if you listen to it, it says, night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. So you can kind of see how that image might have got in my head. But as we look at this scripture, I want to just kind of set the stage. So they came to the other side of the sea. It is the other side of the Sea of Galilee, to the country of the Gerasenes. Now, in Matthew's Gospel, it refers to them as the Gadarenes, and in Luke's Gospel, it refers as the Gerasenes. And if you try and figure out where Gerasene might have been from Gadara, you end up getting a little confused. But it would have been the other side of where the Jews were. It would have been where the Gentiles were. And that is really the point of what Mark is trying to make here in terms of where this is located. And when he had stepped out of the boat, so keep in mind that Jesus has been about walking on the water, stilling the storm, and here he is. He's got down to the boat. Immediately, a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. Now, there is something that is powerful about knowing a name. There is something that is powerful in Scripture about knowing the name of a person, or in particular, think about the story where Moses keeps asking God, who am I going to tell the people that you are? And God's reply is, tell them, I am that I am, or I am who I am, depending on translation. And that power that we have the ability to call something by name, is a very rich, rich thing indeed. It is what makes us familiar with someone on a deeper level, just to be able to call them by name when you see them from afar. It's also the same kind of power it is. How many of you, for example, have ever, when you were growing up, ever got in trouble? Oh, come on. None of you? None of you? All right. And when you got in trouble, your parents or your uncle or your grandparents or whoever it was that raised you, did they just call you by your first name? No. They called you by your entire name. They called you your first, your middle, your last. They may have even said a few other names too, which we can't repeat here. But they said all of your name, did they not? And there is power in that because immediately what happened? You stood up straight. You did what you were supposed to do. Well, most of the time, right? Depends how often you got in trouble. And so it says here when it first describes the man, listen to how it doesn't give him a label at the very first. And that's important for us to know. Immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit. And it's important to understand that there is not a name that is attached to this man at the start. There is just the fact that he is a man and the description of what he has, an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs. Further description of him. See, you have to understand that where he was, nobody wanted him. Where he was, people wanted him as far away from him as they could. And so he literally was dead to them in the sense that he was living there among the tombs. And so he was not to associate or be present with the others because of this unclean spirit, because of everything that was going on in his life. I mean, people really thought, like we mentioned in the call to worship, crazy. And in many respects he was. Because it says no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains. How severe is it? But the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces. There's an intensity of his strength. Just to be that powerful is just crazy indeed. And no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him. Something is different in this moment. Instead of being away, instead of being kept away from the rest of the people, here he sees Jesus at a distance. He runs and he does the thing which you would not perhaps expect him to do. We'll get to that in a little bit, why he does it. But he goes and he bows down, which would have been an act of reverence before Jesus. But it's a bit confusing. He bows down and shouts at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you, I petition you by God, do not torment me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And so it is that we learn more about this nature. We know that even the demons are controlled by God. We know that even the devil is controlled by God. And so Jesus continues on in this line of questioning, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Meaning, it's not just one unclean spirit that's in there. It's not just two unclean spirits that are in there. It's not just 5 or 10. You can imagine how crazy he must be. Later on, we read that the number of swine that the spirit were cast into, the number of pigs that the spirits are cast into, is 2,000. The command of a legion, of an army, that number is immense. I want you to try and wrap your head around just everything that was going on with what was inside of that man. And can you not, in some sense, have pity for him? I think that Jesus certainly did. Here he is, off away from society. There he is, having to be shackled and bound, and he can't even be held anymore. He's bruising himself with stones. He's hurting himself in those ways. And we find that Jesus comes into his life and calls out these demons by name, each and the many that they are. And I don't know that necessarily we have a bunch of demon possession going on in our lives. I'm not doubting that it's present. But how many of us have spirits that trouble us? How many of us have things that worry us? How many of us have those things inside of us that gnaw at us, that get to us, that try and overwhelm us, and that we get so consumed by the list that we have to make, and we get so consumed by the things that we have to do, and we get so consumed by the people that we have to be nice to, and we have to be so consumed by all of those things. That anxiety, that stress, that fear, that brokenness, that all of that is bundled up inside of us. People look at us and they say, hey, at least we think they're looking at us and saying, they look a little bit crazy to you. How many times do we play those images over and over in our head? Yes, I know we're supposed to know that we are children of the Most High God. But how many times do we let those other things creep in? How many times do we let those other things play out? How many times do we let everything else get in the way of being redeemed and knowing that we are redeemed and living into that life? In many ways, we are more like that man who lived in the tombs than we are dissimilar from him. Because every struggle that we make in a weekly way just ties us further into the Scripture. We'll sometimes ask me, they say, yes, but that book was a book that was written 2,000 years ago. How can it apply to our life today? Even here in this story, it applies to us. Even here. My name is Legion, for we are many. He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. The demons did not want to flee, even though they did not have control over the man. Ultimately, Jesus did. And so this really interesting thing happens. Demons have to go back from whence they came. And yet, the demons do not want to go back from whence they came, and so Jesus complies, but does not comply with the demons. Jesus is smarter than that. Now there on the hillside was a great herd of swine feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, send us into the swine, let us enter them. Okay, so he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, but it's not that they just entered the swine, it's where they went. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. Back down into the abyss, back down into the pit, back down into hell. They were not to be kept there for that man to circle back into any longer. And how many times do we find ourselves saying, Lord, I really don't want these demons in my life to come back and be stronger. Just drown them, my fears, my anxieties, in the pit. But what happened in the tomb was nothing short of a resurrection for this man in his life. What happened in the tombs was nothing short of healing. A miracle. It was everything for this man. Now, sometimes when we have those epiphanies and those experiences, not everyone around us experiences it in the same way. Not everyone around us necessarily shares our joy. The swineherd certainly did not feel that way. Look what it says in verse 14. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. And the people came to see what it was that had happened. The pigs? Pigs are not here anymore. They're not out. They are drowned in the sea. They're drowned in that water. And they came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they were afraid. They're trying to figure this out. They're trying to wrap their heads around something. Here is this man who so obviously was crazy, and yet somehow he's not. Here is this man who so obviously was insane, and yet somehow he's not. Here is this man who was reduced to no clothes and was breaking shackles and was living in the tombs and was beating and bruising himself up and did not resemble human in any shape, form, or fashion. And here he is, clothed and in his right mind. What is going on? And as they are trying to process this, as they're trying to figure this out, they get scared because they don't understand. They don't understand what it is that Jesus is doing. They don't understand the salvation that Jesus is bringing to this man. And if anything, they think that it is far removed from salvation. There are murmurs that go throughout Scripture. Oh, people who don't understand Jesus. Well, he must be Beelzebub. He must be Satan. He's the one who's casting out these demons. But who else can have control? They don't understand that Jesus is the Son of the Most High God, and that even the demons flee from him. They just do not understand that. And there have been scholars that have said that those from the town got upset. There have been those scholars who have said the reason that they got upset was because it was an economic burden, that somehow 2,000 swine was what was going to just sink the town. But it's more than that. It's fear of the unknown. It's fear of what we do not understand. And how many times do we let that drown us? How many times do we let the fear of not knowing someone and who they are and not being willing to interact sink us outright? And here is our Lord and Savior Jesus setting the example, boldly going to the places that so many in the gospel fear going directly to those places. And those people who are in need come running to him. Even as they're confused in the moment, even as they're uncertain about what's going on, they still come to him. And that is no different from today. That is no different from the places that God is calling us to today, that God is calling us to those places that are broken, that we may be scared to go to, that those places that Jesus is needed every bit as much. You know those places, you have seen them, you know those people, you have heard them crying out and calling out. But have you put shackles on them? Have we put shackles on them? Have we tried to restrain them? Have we been willing to go where they are? It is easy to forget. It is hard to not be scared in the midst of that. It is hard to be brave. And I want to tell you that bravery does not mean the absence of being scared. Bravery does not mean the absence of fear. That is a whitewashing of bravery. Bravery is knowing all of those things and being bold enough to go anyway, because Jesus has been there first. And because Jesus loves us, Jesus will go with us wherever we go. It means to be bold because we have a Creator who has loved us and has valued us. And because God has loved us and valued us, there is not one that God does not seek to save. Those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it, and they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him, and is with Jesus. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And here's the clincher. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. Deca, Greek, 10. 10 cities. Not just one. Not just to his friends and the one. But what Jesus had done for him in salvation was such that it could not be contained to just this one little village, to this one little town, to this one little isolated place. And so it is that Jesus sends this man out on a completely different kind of mission, commissioning him in a way there to the Gentiles. And word about him spreads. And word about him is magnified and goes out and cannot be contained. That is the power of one man's life changed by Jesus. So when you weigh the fears that you have, the uncertainty that you have, going out into the tombs of your own life with the results of what happens when Jesus gets a hold of that person and frees that person. The results are far more than we could ask or imagine. Our God is